Well, hello everybody, it's Gary again from Lantana Removal, Queensland. Thanks for popping on in. So I got another piece of information from the Department of Primary Industries in New South Wales, which is interesting. Really says a lot about nothing. But you know, one of the things that came from the by-election is that at no time did we hear any responses about ecological matters from any of the parties within that stuff. Mr Turnbulls of no interest of any of these things. Look, I have a really good life that I get to work out in the open doors. We do a lot of our works on 20 to 30 degree slopes, so you know, we do what they say can't be done, and we do it with leaving the leaf litter still sitting on the hillside and all of the dirt and earth still sitting there. It is one of those things that it's a constant evolution of working with people and getting to meet different people that have a lot of these infestations around the local areas and further out. And so many of them keep naming councils like Somerset S Council and Logan and Brisbane City Council and Moreton Bay Regional Council. And not very many of them have a very good thing to say about any of those councils, because basically they're being hung out to dry by the councils as far as getting anything done with the Lantana. We were out talking to a gentleman. His family's bought a property out near Dundas, near where I shot that film footage of the bottom of Mount Glorious footage, where you see the drone footage and that. And one of the interesting things there is that infestation actually continues up and over the mountain there down to the other side where he is. He's actually further to the south, say about 10 k's further to the south. And those same infestations continue all the way from where they are, through the waterboard lands, up over the range and down into that section where we filmed, and then continue up through the Diagula National Park. And all this time you're saying to Mr Turnbull, who has no ecological presence at all, no ecological management strategies at all. He's had it brought to his attention many times about exactly how bad this Lantana situation is, and never have any of them bothered to contact. You just get double dutch from their staff members and whatnot, Deputy Director General for biosecurity and food safety, and you just can't get any real sense out of any of these things. They just say that they work control weeds and implemented by key stakeholders of land care and individual landholders and local councils and that, and yet the local councils say that they don't do any Lantana at all. You know, do these guys even read what is actually happening out in the real world? Do they open a window and have a look outside? I know Mr Turnbull doesn't, and I know Anastasia Palaszczuk doesn't, and I know the New South Wales Premier definitely doesn't, because there's no serious answer to any of these things that have been brought forward. Okay, all of the councils say that they do zero weed management. There's no Lantana management at all, and yet both of the state and federal government bumped their responsibilities down to the councils and never checked that anybody was actually doing the work. So basically every single one of them has turned their back on the problem. The only trouble is that the law actually states, so the federal government's responsible for the overall statement, okay, the overall managing statement, and they've asked for people to please put down their correspondence, their views, okay, and I've posted those links and I've put those links across Facebook for people to have their say. That's for individual landholders, ratepayers, right through to massive development people. Now that's how they changed the biosecurity stuff with the lowering the classification on Lantana. They did it in secret, and then they say, oh no, but hold on, we didn't do it secretly, we actually put this out there. Well, hold on a minute. The only reason why I found it was because I was searching through, and I actually found about a dozen different committees. These are government committees that report to other government committees, who report to other government committees, who report to biosecurity, who report to the weeds of national significance mob. You know, there's 50 different committees all sucking our money out of the system, and there's zero money for actual eradication processes. And we work in places that this material must be eradicated from, because water travels this material, and the government doesn't want you to know that. That's why they left it out of all of the documentation, but the actual experts admit that that's how this material moves. They're aware of it, just they don't want to admit to it. Because you think about what it changes. All of that country that the Water Board, South East Queensland Water Board control, you need to have a look at what that's like. I've got film footage that I'm going to start putting up over the next couple of weeks that you must see how that travels up over those ranges and down into those other places and just continues north. There's thousands of kilometres of this material continuously linked one way or another through all those areas. And there is no management strategy. Now, I was talking to the Environment and Mines section, and they were saying to me the other day that if you had let's say you had 100 acres of Lantana, it's unreasonable for us, for me, to them, to somebody to walk into your property and say, you need to clean up that 100 acres. So what they actually prefer to do is to say to you, well, listen, you have to put a buffer around your land. Let's say it's a 100-metre buffer inside your perimeter, and then you must diminish your mass of Lantana, okay, over the years to come. And that would be considered by them to be a reasonable finding on you, because you're governed by a general biosecurity obligation. The council's actually got exactly the same obligation, but they do zero. They admit they do zero. Mr Turnbull's been brought to his attention. They do zero. I've got it in writing. They do zero. Why is Mr Turnbull not jumping up and down on the phone to somebody and saying, you guys are going to get me sacked? Why isn't Anastasia Palaszczuk going, you know what, when it comes around to the next election, our backsides are going to be grass and it's going to get mowed? This is absolutely insanity on its greatest level, and yet this is the government that we have in power, that they have all of these committees constantly sucking funds out of our system. There's no funds for us to do work to lower that mass. But Mr and Mrs Average is supposed to lower their mass, and they keep coming to me going, well, how do we make the council do something about their infestations that are infesting our property? These people, this is real-time, real-life jobs. These people are bordered on 3 sides. They're bordered on 2 sides by Water Board and on the 3rd side by national parks. They have Lantana pouring into their property. And none of these authorities, none of these land managers are doing anything about reducing the mass. They're not even doing anything about actually putting buffer zones in. The government, the Department of Mines and Energy, just finished saying that that is how that works. And when you say to them, yeah, but hold on a minute, isn't the council well, yes, actually, yes, you're right. The council is actually under exactly the same law that I've just laid out there. But they don't do it. Yes, well, they're using our lowering the classification as an excuse not to, but they are actually supposed to. Now, why isn't Anastasia Palaszczuk doing something about the councils? Anastasia Palaszczuk is completely negligent in her responsibilities to the general public. I hope that we vote on this when the elections come around, because the land clearing's only a smokescreen for what's actually happening with the weeds of national significance. And this is all of the weeds. There's 32 of them. Not just Lantana, but Lantana's 10 million hectares. Through the greatest management of Lantana in this country's history, these are facts, in this country's history, have seen the Palaszczuk government, the Turnbull government, the New South Wales government double its volume. Is nobody actually hearing that? But it's only farmers that are causing the problems. You know, why do we keep having these smoke screens that it's farmers clearing lands that cause the ozone layer to be damaged? There's 100 million, 150 million animals homeless under the Palaszczuk government's and the New South Wales government's management of the situation. Why is nobody asking questions about that? A lot of this film footage that you're going to see that's going to keep coming up and coming up, it's all new footage, it's all new places. You're going to see one thing start to show up. There's no animals living there. There's no animals trafficking through that area. The only ones that will go into any of that material is the vermin, like the pigs and the wild dogs and things like that. But even in that, they're in that smaller number of how many are taking residence. They live around the edges of this stuff. And they raid out from the national parks from there. But when you look at all of this material that this stuff isn't being lived in, you can't help but say, so where is all of the population of the animals going? It's not farmers causing this problem. Although the greatest place that this stuff really explodes is when it has less impact on it, like vacant lands, like lands that the water board has where they do nothing with the lands. All of them have played such big games with removing cattle off those properties and doing this and doing that, instead of managing the weeds. It's then made the Lantana 10 times worse. They've doubled it in 10 years. They're going to triple it in the next 10. Under the current policies of these governments, they're going to triple Lantana in the next 10 years. And the only thing that will change that is if people actually stand up and start to demand answers. Start to say, why don't the council have to clean up their stuff? They're infesting your properties. And the level that you're going to pay for this in the future is astronomical. But those are the sorts of things that we're about, shaking up those things and starting to show people that the work can actually be done. You know, the cost is a national works program. You can't turn your back on cancer and hope for a happy outcome. It's not going to be a happy outcome. This stuff is growing up and down over mountain ranges as it travels north, and it's thousands of kilometres long. You know, we're fighting it in different spots along that path. That we're fighting at 30 k's up the road, 50 k's up the road, but it's still the same infestations moving north. That's how big the infestations are. And the government bodies that are supposed to have policed this and kept this taken care of are the ones that people need to be sacking the government over. Either the government starts standing on these departments like the Main Roads Department, the Water Board, the Electricity mob, Energex and Ergon and all those guys, South East Queensland Water. Unless they start standing on these people and forcing them to clean up their messes, the amount of grazing land down there at Dundas and places like that near Somerset is astronomical. The Water Board has massive infestations there, and right on the fence line they put a like a fire break, but they put one blade cut with a dozer through that whole area and a couple of cuts across it, right, so they can drive in different areas, and the rest is just a sea of Lantana. And a sea, I do not kid you, it's an absolute sea. But then completely, that fence is completely swallowed up by Lantana that's 30 feet tall, and for the next 20 feet out, and that's the council's land. So who is infesting what? And the people on the other side of the road are continuously fighting a battle to try and stop the Lantana from coming into their property. Why are people having to pay these sorts of prices to stop the government who actually is acting illegally? Why don't we not have a royal commission into saying, well, where is all this money gone? You know, they haven't spent it on the weeds. The only thing they've done is play games with scientists and things like that, and they've never done any good. They've doubled it. If you increased it by 1%, or let's say even if you increased it by 10%, you'd say that's a very bad day. But to increase it by double is a very serious issue. And 10 years is a blink of an eye. Another 10 and it's going to triple. You know, that's why I'm so adamant about getting people the video and the factual photographic evidence, so you can start to see exactly how this stuff moves across the land, because that is the keys to stopping this, to getting to where we actually meet its critical mass, its expansion rate. And then we can do something. Then we have some time to move on from that point. But there is nothing being done at any level of government. Mr Turnbulls never contacted me or any part of any of the departments or the state governments to sit down and go, so how do you plan to stop this? How are we going to get this up and running? This is that critical, that the places they have this material growing now is what has changed. You couldn't make better mistakes on the weeds side of it if you had a roadmap. You know, they couldn't have got it any more wrong, and yet they're the ones writing the booklets that are completely wrong. I cannot understand, except that I suppose it's only logical. If you live in a bubble and you don't know anything that happens outside of that bubble and you hypothesize every single thing, then yes, I suppose you can get it completely wrong and be going the wrong direction. But you know, where does that become willful misinformation, in that water moves this material like you wouldn't believe? That's one of the greatest things that all of these infestations prove. And the way it moves across the land changes how much money you hemorrhage in meeting that growth rate. And yet farmers have been battling this material forever, and they've been successfully, in the greatest majority of them, while they're in their youth, stopping it from taking over their farms completely. But we have a real critical problem going to happen in our country very, very shortly, and that is our farmers are getting old. Okay? And our farmers are basically very foolish people. They spend a lot of money on educating their children, and when they educated their children, the children went, why would I want to go and smash my head against that brick wall, take on all of that debt, and try and make a living out of something that my family, my father and my father's father, have pretty much proved the government is that much against you that what hope do you have of ever doing any good? And then every other person is busy saying, well, the farmers killed all the koalas, they killed all this stuff. Anastasia Palaszczuk has 100 million animals evicted from the state forests, and the same with the New South Wales Premier. So at what point do we start to actually look at who is the ones doing the damage? And have they picked up the phone? Have they, look, if they came and had a talk, off the camera, came and had a talk and saw the levels of infestations, and then went, you know what, our experts say we don't need to worry about 10 million plus hectares of Lantana in some of the most inhospitable terrain as it's getting into more and more. We don't have to worry about that. But the councils are doing nothing. The state and federal government are doing nothing. These guys in New South Wales say that they're dealing with land care. Land care's a joke. Land care is a joke. It uses volunteer labour. It's about, not even that much on a scale of this big a problem. Not even a millimetre. And they work with them. It's a joke. They cannot make a significant difference to the edges of the material. And they've been doing it for Landcare, I think, saying they got 20 years into this. And it's doubled in that time frame. Tell me why I should be warm and fuzzy about Landcare. When I contacted the people, they never bothered to get back to me. You know, we are in a desperate situation that just what I saw yesterday around that Dundas and those areas there is on a scale that you need to see it to understand why I'm beside myself. Maybe we need to have public meetings in these sorts of places and get together and go, have a look at this stuff. Right? And then ask Mr Turnbull, then ask Anastasia Palaszczuk, then ask the New South Wales Premier. Right? Start asking them. Well, there's the evidence. What's your story? Because they've got zero being spent on this. Zero. Like, what is the plan? Okay, Mr Turnbull, what is the plan? Okay, I'm seriously asking you, what is the plan? How are we going to get away from what we have now? Now it's zero. The councils are doing nothing about it. The state government's doing nothing about it. The state government in Queensland has created such a red tape debacle, and not ever sitting down to have a discussion about how this is now turned into the greatest calamity for the whole of the Australian nation. 10 million hectares is not an insignificant amount, and you're doing zero. Not doing a little bit, you're doing zero. The growth rate on this material is exponentially growing, that in the next 10 years it's going to triple, right? It's going to be 30 plus to 40 million hectares, and you still won't have any plan then, because you got your heads in the sand now. So why would we have any confidence that coming the next election this is going to change? If you're not taking it seriously now enough to sit down and try and figure out where this all went south, and not take any action, not create the funding, create the process, create the mechanism to actually do the work. Get in there, get it done, and then decide how to fine-tune the edges after that. But on the levels that we have now, there is no going back from this point. We have to do something, or else the cost is going to be God only knows what. And yet, just trying to get that information out there and get people to share it and get people to openly talk about it, you have to drive through that country, or just have a look at my drone footage. Have a look at the footage that's coming up now with the photos and everything else in the next lot of stuff I post over this next week. Will shock you as to the levels of this material and how it moves across the land. And that is what these people don't understand. We need some policies. We need some people with some grit and some leadership. Because you can't keep pretending this doesn't exist. It's already at these levels. You can't pretend that it is not a problem. Anyway, look, I'm Gary. Thank you for popping in. Lantana Removal Queensland. This is what we do for a living. We do consultation work with people. We show people how to, eradicate the material in the consultation process. We also do contract work where we work day rates and things like that to remove the material itself. We remove material routinely from 20 and 30 degrees. The material must be cleared from the high country first, and it's understanding how this material moves that is critical to getting the best economical return for your money. We have people who have spent 20, 30, 50 grand on these processes already, not with us, with the stuff, and gotten nowhere because they're doing it completely wrong. There is no understanding of what they're doing. Others are poisoning enormous amounts of our country and just laying waste everything. 12 months later and longer, it just looks like a moonscape. It's completely barren and dead. When it does come back, the things that come back faster and harder where they have water access is the weeds. You know, completely the process that these people, the Department of Primary Industries, have are completely wrong. I have no problems in backing that up any day of the week. The stuff I see in the real world applications of their book and the rest of the stuff is completely wrong. It does not work the way they think it does. Now, how much of it is willful, how much of it is accidental, I can't tell you. But we need to start doing something very seriously about the mass. The same way that you're supposed to reduce the mass of the material, the government should be every year having to reduce the mass and prove that they are spending the money and they are committed to reducing the mass so that we get to the critical level of growth. If we decide to do no more from that point and we're beating the critical mass, then at least we're staying where we are. At the moment, there is nothing holding this material back, and where they are allowing it to grow now is the difference. It is why it has all changed, and why I'm so passionately begging you to please share the information and discuss it. Start letting these councils know that you know the jig is up. They have the same rules on them that you do. So they need to put a perimeter barrier around your property. They need to cut you a buffer zone between their infestations and your property. And they must reduce that mass by law. It's the Biosecurity Act. And by law, that mass must be being reduced. There's a whole heap of misinformation and lies from the Department of Primary Industries, the environment, from the ministers, from the Prime Minister, from every other part of this, telling you that because they secretly changed that to a lower level, a low risk, on a toxic, noxious plant, that their own documents say it's actually killed people. So how can it be low risk? Says that the mass must be reduced. And yet all of their government departments are completely in breach of the law. How is that not being addressed? Does the public have to get together and sue the government in some way? Is that what we need to do? I would call that an election. But I really don't think we have until Mr Turnbull comes up for election to decide this particular issue, and then wait till the state government comes up for re-election. People's memories are too easily altered by the time the election comes around, and the brainwashing's been going on for a considerable amount of time. We must start to hold these people accountable. Anyway, I'm Gary from Lantana Removal Queensland, 0449 986 880. Remember that, lantanaremovalqueensland.com.au, and we care about the work that we do. We care about an environment, and that's why I'm spending nearly $500 to $1,000 a month on Facebook to get this message out to people. That's my money. That's my family's money to try and get this message out to people. And it costs you nothing to share it and to discuss it and to put it out there to people, because if we don't make a stand soon, we're not going to have wildlife. We're not going to have these things. And the costs are going to have to be dealt with. Don't let these bums kid you. Eventually we will be paying for this completely. We will not be able to pretend anymore. And the money that we will be expending on it will be not a joke any longer. You know, it's just a disgrace that you have to go to these levels to try and get these governments to act legally. They're breaking the law, and there's nowhere, like, we should be able to go and say, well, we want a royal commission, or we want there must be some legal situation there where this actually would be looked into, because they're breaking the Constitution. They're absolutely, you can't possibly be leaving this material like this with zero management. And we need to stop talking about management. We need eradication. We need eradication to meet those levels. And mechanical eradication is the only thing that will deliver those outcomes to those volumes. Poisoning is just a disaster. Burning is just a disaster. Thank you very much for popping in. Thank you. We'll talk to you soon. Bye.